Mitsubishi A6M0. It had to be long-ranged, it had to be able to achieve 370 miles an hour, and it had to be of short wingspan to fit on the carrier decks. And Mitsubishi's designer, Jiro Horikoshi, managed to achieve all those aims, not least by saving a considerable amount of weight using a very light aluminium alloy construction also developed in Japan. The result was an outstanding fighter for the early part of World War II, very manoeuvrable, with long range and endurance. The Zero-Sen first saw combat action in late 1940, coming up against Polikarpov I-16 Raka fighters of the Chinese Nationalist Air Force and gaining their maiden victories. And here come the first of the American fighters to hopefully see the Zero off. First, the Goodyear G1D Corsair, then the Curtiss P-46 Tomahawk. And long range came at a cost because the A6M was vulnerable to enemy fire and having protection negated its advantages. But the pilots of the Imperial Japanese Navy were very skilled at engine management and long range navigation in the Pacific theatre. To give one example of their exploits, in August 1942 there occurred the Battle of Guadalcanal, the first big Allied offensive in the Pacific, and the renowned Japanese ace Sub-Lieutenant Saburo Sakai, who scored 28 official victories, flew his damaged Zero 640 miles in 4.75 hours back to his land base with a blinded right eye, heavy bleeding from a head wound and partial paralysis after being hit by fire from US Navy Dauntless dive bombers. In comes the Zero for another attack run, and I think another pair of American fighters are ready to go up after it. Yes, here they go, scrambling off Duxford's runway, the Grumman FM2 Wildcat and the Curtiss Hawk 75. They scored important successes in destroying Japanese carriers, 4 of them at Midway alone. And now, here come the Corsair and the Tomahawk. Allied counterparts' disadvantage. The weaknesses both of the Zero and the men who were flying it. And the Allies came to develop tactics better suited to countering the Zero. They used the element of surprise and advantages of heightened speed to negate the Japanese fighter's rate of climb and its turning ability. The bent-wing bird, as it was known on account of its inverted gull-wing configuration, a hugely impressive performer when first it appeared. Its Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine was the most powerful and biggest capacity engine of any fighter at the time, and it became in whose colours the fighter collections aircraft appears today, that qualified the Corsair for carrier operations before even the US Navy did so. Soon, aboard F4U, the Corsair was able to outclass the Zero and other enemy fighters in most aspects of aerial combat. The US Marines employed its Corsairs very effectively as a fighter and fighter bomber, as they helped with the island-hopping campaign through the Pacific. The most famous exponent of the Corsair, the somewhat controversial Major Gregory P. Boyington, who claimed 26 Japanese aircraft destroyed using F4U Corsairs. The fleet air arm of the Royal Navy had 18 squadrons of Corsairs at one point, flew them in both the European and Pacific theatres. And behind it, they seem to be on the Zero, is the Curtiss T-40C Tomahawk, one of that great family of Curtiss fighters. Agile aeroplanes, excellent at low level, stable gun platforms, very durable, and indeed they had to be, the sort of theatres in which they excelled. There were P-40Cs of two US Army Air Corps pursuit groups stationed in Hawaii at Wheeler Field and Bellows Field at the time of the Pearl Harbor attack. Now we move on to another Curtiss fighter, the Hawk 75, accompanied by the Grumman FM2 Wildcat. It says something for the improved tactics that the US forces developed to counter the Zero, that while early in the war the Wildcat was outclassed by its Japanese counterpart in the Pacific theatre, when those tactics came into being, the Wildcat became much more effective against it, and the Lockheed P-38 Lightning and the Grumman F-6F Hellcat were better still. The Hawk 75, here depicting the Curtiss P-36 Hawk, mid-1930s design, one of outstanding flying qualities, and ordered to quantity in the late 1930s. While the P-40 family was soon under development to replace it, some P-36s based at Pearl Harbor saw the type's sole combat in US service when they shot down a pair of Mitsubishi Zeros on the 7th of December 1941. A survivor of the Battle of France, that was one of the main actions in which the type participated. They were probably the best French Air Force fighters of the time, and the first Allied aerial victories on the Western Front of World War II involved Hawk 75 shooting down a pair of Messerschmitt Bf-109s in September 1939. Harvard-based replica wasn't suitable, as it turned out, for much further development, though Mitsubishi did refine the design through successive models. Further was its successor, the Mitsubishi J2M Raiden, a great success. Nonetheless, Zeros continued to be built until 1945, the tune of more than 11,000 examples. The kamikaze suicide missions, in which so many of those aircraft were engaged towards the end of the war, were a sign of Japanese desperation. It looks like somehow one of those American fighters was successful in achieving its objective of countering the Japanese opponent. And with a wing rock, it admits defeat. As we get ready to see some final flypasts from the P-40C, the Hawk 75, the Wildcat, and the Corsair. The four Pacific Theatre fighters come in. Of course, it's worth reflecting that apart from the aircraft we see here, there was, of course, a major US strategic bombing campaign in the Pacific.
The island hopping, the naval battles, the hand-to-hand fighting of the Marines and infantry were all paying off at once. Japanese aircraft production was reduced 50% within a space of weeks. Japanese shipping was slashed to shreds, and their war plants were systematically eliminated. The superfortresses rained a constant stream of destruction and were accompanied on their missions by strong fighter escorts to protect them. Tokyo, Nagasaki, Yokohama, Churi, and every other major city of Japan was bombed and rebombed by the B-29s. Entire cities were destroyed, while others were left smoking and paralyzed. Millions of Japanese were forced to flee. In these final days of the war, air power and air power alone was bringing a nation to its knees.
Halloran was a B-29 Superfortress navigator flying as so many of those aircraft did from Saipan in the Marianas Islands.
I saw three Japanese planes. I identified them as fighter planes. As it turns out, I now know all the details, but they were there off about a mile away, and I saw them head for me. They're just hanging there, and two of them.
rider of all four of those beautiful Pacific-era fighters. All types important in their own different ways to the success, the eventual success